Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Sleep Central webinar led by Celynn Morin. She'll be taking us through the steps to master the art of strategic rest and wake up feeling refreshed every morning, which I'm sure all of us will be able to benefit from. Many of you will remember Celynn from her fantastic session back in May at the annual conference on performance chemistry. Obviously, that's available on the website for you guys to catch up on at any time, as this will be. It's really important stuff, so we're really looking forward to this session. Celynn, welcome.
Thank you, Jenny, and hi to everyone that's here. As I share my slides, I'd like you to pop into the chat and make sure that when you put it in there, that you've put it to go to everyone, not just the panelists. How would you rate the way that you felt this morning? So when you woke up this morning, 10 out of 10, being that you felt bountiful, energized, maybe you even woke up before your alarm, and then anything else relative to that. So pop into the chat between 1 and 10. How did you feel this morning when you woke up? And let's see how we're doing in terms of arriving today. And then let me share that slide. Open up the chat so I can see that. Wonderful. So we have 5, 6s, 5s again, 6. Oh, it seems to be middle range to lower. So you're definitely in the right place at the right time. All right. Thank you for that. So I don't need to tell you that when you get a good night's rest, you wake up and you feel like anything's possible. However, when you're struggling with sleep or when you don't get enough sleep, then everything can feel insurmountable. So sleep really affects everything. And if sleep was easy and simple, we would all be doing it right. I wouldn't have had the experiences around my own insomnia, and you wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be hosting this webinar. But it's an issue. And more with the pace of change and the amount of stimulation that our nervous systems are under, so many more of us are feeling really tired at night, but potentially wired. So if you want to make sure that you have really good mental health, emotional regulation, physical energy, and just a sense of vitality and joy, sleep really is the cornerstone. So we're going to take a look at how you can get a deeper awareness of sleep. And I really want you to be able to leave with one thing that you could take into your own routine around not just sleep, but rest, because rest is the bridge to sleep, right? So if we learn how to rest, it can help us to potentially surrender to the biggest rest of all, which is sleep. And well-being is not a way of learning and doing in theory. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you is not rocket science. Like, you know this. But what we also know, what I know from doing this work, is that common knowledge isn't always common practice. So I really want you decide what you get out of today. So we've got another 45 minutes or so together, and then we're going to do a deep relaxation exercise, and then we'll wrap up. And so that might seem like a lot of time because I know that you've got like 100 things on your to-do list. It might not seem like enough time because you really realize that this is such an important topic for you. But regardless of how long or short the time is that we spend together, I know that the next hour that we're together could potentially be a life-changing pocket of time. But that's only if you actually take something away with you that you can do and put into practice as a human being. Because well-being is about being a certain way. We can have all the knowledge in our head, all of us can go and read all the books about sleep. But if we're not putting things into practice, it's not going to give us that kind of outcome. So I know that right now you've got your cell phone close by. You might even be looking at it. You've got a few other things open. You might not even be watching me. You've just got me on audio. That's not going to help you take away something that could be life-changing. So if you're able to, let's start right now with permission to arrive and to rest. So what do I suggest? We take in a lot of stimulation through our eyes and the visual cortex. And I'm going to come back to that as to how you can manage the last hour or two before you go to bed. That can help a lot through your eyes. But right now, it's the middle of the afternoon, whatever time of day it is when you watch this, you might be watching the recording. You've been taking in a lot of visual information and stimulus. Why don't we give our eyes a little bit of a break? So what you do, and I encourage you to do this, is to rub your hands together for about 5 seconds or so. So create a little bit of warmth. And then I'm going to tell you when to open your eyes again. So you can relax into this for a few moments and take a few deep breaths. Cover your eyes with your palms. You might feel the heat And then take 3 nourishing deep breaths. It's all right if you're not looking at the screen, you're not going to miss any information. But really allow yourself to arrive without being distracted by something else coming in through your eyes. And 1 more deep breath in. And then gently move your palms away from your eyes, gently open your eyes, let the light back in. And you might actually find that it's quite alarming to get all that information and stimulus coming back. But there's a little exercise that you can do regularly in the day, especially if you're spending a lot of time behind your screen. So I'm going to go into more practical exercises that we can do. But some of you may not know me. So who am I? Why do I even have the ability to speak on this topic? Well, most importantly, I'm human, which means that I also sleep a third of my life. And I'll share with you in a moment a little bit of my own personal journey around sleep. But really, this work that I do around helping busy professionals manage their sense of joy and quality of life through well-being is a calling. It's the way that I really want to create impact in the world. So you may recognize my accent. I was born in South Africa. My family are all from the Champagne region in France. My parents went to South Africa on honeymoon many moons ago, and I was born there. I studied to be a dietitian because I was passionate about food and how it connects to our well-being. I then started doing work in workplace well-being in 2006 after 5 years of being a clinical dietitian. And I've written some books. I'm really passionate about staying up to date and getting qualifications around neuroscience and embodiment and genetics. And so I'm deeply passionate about this topic, but more so, I'm deeply passionate about sleep. So we all have our own sleep story, and it's very important to think about when you were born and when you were a young child, and then when you moved through into teenage years, adult life, how did your sleep journey unfold? You know, as far as I can remember, I've been a very light sleeper. I think some of it is linked to my birth story. And now I know some of it is linked to my genetics, because now we can do genetic testing, and I understand that I've got potentially a variation in one of the genes. So I have lots of dopamine in my brain. That's why I'm so motivated and I can run my own business. However, I don't clear out the dopamine. So the broom that's supposed to come and sweep it away doesn't work so well. So at night, I can have a very busy mind. And having that information has helped me to approach my sleep strategies a bit differently. And the exciting news is you can also find out these kind of things about yourself. I then got married and I ended up sleeping next to somebody who snored. And that was difficult. So I experimented with different types of earplugs and noises and sounds. Unfortunately, part of that journey meant that I got given sleeping pills, and they can be very addictive. So I have a story of having to come off them and manage my own sleep again. I no longer sleep next to somebody who snores, but I have found that since COVID and the pandemic, that my nervous system is more sensitive to stress. And so I just wanted to share that I understand what it's like to struggle to sleep. I also know what it's like when I get a good night's rest and everything works. So today, I'm going to share a lot of what I've practiced myself, but because of the nature of my work, I have the privilege of hearing many people's stories around their well-being and specifically around sleep. And so I can say that many of these strategies work. We're all unique though, so it's important to be curious and try them. Don't take my word for it, but also don't discard the things I say, because some of the stuff might seem a bit woo-woo, and then you try it and you may just be surprised at what works for you. I would love to know if you'll pop into the chat a yes if you've seen this TED Talk. So Matt Walker, who's the author of the book Why We Sleep, perhaps you've even read the book, but have you seen the TED Talk, yes or no? If you haven't, it's a brilliant 19 minutes that explains why sleep is so important. And a lot of you are saying no. One person has said yes. Yeah, it's a really good talk. If you enjoy his approach, you can always listen to some of his podcasts and interviews that he's done, or you can dive into his book. It's a bit of an encyclopedia, but it gives you a lot of in-depth science around why we need sleep, and especially around dreams. And after reading the book, I really changed my relationship to sleep, because sometimes I would feel like it was a waste of time and I'd get irritated and annoyed. That doesn't help us feel restful, right? But since understanding how important dreams are and especially falling into REM sleep, it's not an act of doing nothing. You know, we often think that lying in bed and being horizontal, that we're not doing much. Without that, we could not function. So getting the right quality sleep is essential to help us show up as humans. And what makes it so difficult is the fact that we have so much stress. And stress, from the moment we open our eyes and we pick up our phones, we potentially are pulled into that fight or flight response. And so many of us are struggling to sleep at night because we're wired. We're also struggling because we don't practice rest. And I'm going to explain what I mean by practice rest. And also we end up collapsing. Now, collapsing is very different to resting. And also sleep, we're focusing on one aspect of your well-being, but there's many others and they're all interconnected. Now, if you were at the conference and we had an opportunity to meet, you would have been taken through my Wellculator framework. So I wanted to position the big picture, right? Because sleep is one aspect of the 10 dimensions that I look at around holistic well-being. So for instance, the way you eat and the way you manage your blood sugar during the day will impact how you sleep at night. Whether you have alcohol in the last hour or two of sleeping will impact how you sleep, whether you've done exercise. And we're not going to go into all of those different things, but I wanted to give you the big picture to understand that there could be other factors affecting you and your relationship to sleep. If you would like to access the Wellculator, it's available free of charge on my website. You go to the landing page and I'll share the details with you later. You put in your email of preference, and then I take you through the Wellculator and can guide you into the other things that might be impacting your sleep. Today, over the time that we have together, we're going to focus on 4 aspects of the Wellculator. So mindfulness, setting positive intentions and using things like gratitude, being aware of the stress response, managing your breathing, for instance, and then how we can really approach sleep. And the way we're going to approach sleep is looking at the 4 phases that we need for sleep that are not just about what happens the hour or two before we go to bed, but I am going to share with you a beautiful, what I call sensorial approach to sleep. So how can you use your senses and be curious about them and how they could potentially set you up for better sleep success with more ease? And no matter what, this time together, if you're gifting yourself the present of being present and you're not being too distracted and your nervous system is able to relax, I promise you that by the time we wrap up, you may feel like you have been to a spa, especially when we do the relaxation meditation towards the end. I'm doing it towards the end because some people feel like they want to doze off. I will make sure that you know how to energize yourself because your day probably isn't ending after this session. But I'd like you to have an experience of some rest. And if you enjoy the relaxation, I'm actually going to share the recording with anybody who would like that. Right, so when we look out at nature, nature is super intelligent, right? And we've got so many examples of the natural ebb and flow of life. You know, we tend to feel that we're robots. And I think in the age of artificial intelligence and technology and change, it can certainly feel like we need to be like machines to keep up with everything. But if we keep doing that, we end up heading towards burnout. And we're seeing that, right? As a health professional and as HR professionals, I don't need to tell you, you know, mental health issues are on the increase. Even though we have access to more and more health information, people are actually less and less healthy. And nature reminds us that everything happens in cycles. You know, if you look at the top left corner, you've got there, it could be a sunrise or a sunset. So the sun comes up. It also doesn't come up instantly. So it's not like a light switch on off. It's more of a dial. There's a beautiful lesson in that. When we wake up, I'm going to speak about how can you rise more like a sunrise and set more like a sunset. May sound a bit way out there and far-fetched, but the more we connect to nature and our own natural circadian rhythms, the more effective and productive we are. And we can actually get more done in less time when we use our natural rhythms. So sometimes taking time out actually feels like you put time in, as opposed to pushing and grinding and feeling as if you have to override and then end up with exhaustion and collapsing on the weekends, only to start the cycle again on a Monday morning. And I live not too far from the ocean, so I sometimes go and walk at the Witterings. And I'm reminded of the tides, because I always check if it's high tide or low tide, because it's nice to walk on the sand versus the pebbles. And once again, you've got the tide going out and resting and coming back in and increasing. Of course, there's the moon. We have full moon, but not all the time. It wanes and it waxes. And I don't know if there's any musicians in the group, but music would not work if there were no pauses between the notes. It would just be this great big cacophony of sound. So everywhere in nature, and even in music, we see these pauses where we need to stop and rest. I mentioned that my family are from the Champagne region in France. I love anything to do with champagne. And one of the things, because I understand the champagne making process so well, and it's actually a beautiful metaphor for well-being. And one of my masterclasses is based around the champagne making process as a metaphor for well-being. But one of the things that strikes me always is in winter, when the vines rest and they seem to be almost dying, that's when they're actually getting stronger. So vines that get exposed to harsh climates in the winter, like real cold or potentially drought, actually grow deeper roots and come back more resilient. So when we stop and rest, and it looks like potentially nothing's going on, we're not being productive, we're almost dying, so to speak, because sleep, some people say, is preparation for the greatest sleep of all, which is death, right? But in that time, we're getting stronger, because without REM sleep and that deep theta delta brainwave activity, you wouldn't regulate your emotions properly, you wouldn't save your memories, you wouldn't be able to function at the rate that you do. So understanding the cycles is so important, and allowing and giving ourselves permission to go into that deep winter and rest is important. And so a framework that I find works so beautifully that could get you to reflect on your own attitude and approach to rest in general, not just sleep, is to overlap the 4 seasons onto a 24-hour day. So by 4 seasons, I'm not talking about, a piece of music by Vivaldi or a pizza. It is literally the seasons of spring, summer, autumn, winter. And what do I mean by spring? When you woke up this morning, either with an alarm or without, or the dogs or kids, when you became conscious, that is what I call spring. However, summer starts when you need to be busy, like a busy bee, and when you are pulled into other people's agendas. So the moment you pick up your phone and you engage with Slack messages or emails or WhatsApps, or potentially listen to the news, you don't know what's coming at you. And so that could pull you into the fight or flight response, start stimulating you. And that's what I call summer. And then right now, we can feel that the times are changing, right? The season's changing. We're getting close to the equinox. The days are starting to get shorter, colder. Leaves aren't quite changing color, but they're going to soon. So the same with us. At the end of our day, after we've gone 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, to just climb into bed and expect to stop and fall into sleep, which is almost like hibernation or winter, without some kind of slowdown, goes completely against our natural rhythm. So what I'd like us to do is to reflect on specifically looking at spring, so your early morning, and then we're going to spend quite a bit of time looking at the things that you can do before you wind down and get into bed, by looking at your senses, so the 5 senses. And these may be things that you already are putting into practice, but even if you pick up one that you could be curious about, it could really change how your body approaches sleep and rest. So this morning, or generally when you wake up in the morning, I'm curious, how long is your spring? So when you wake up and you start your day, if you're happy to share in the chat, I'm curious, how long between waking up and looking at your phone and getting in external input through social media, news, emails, messages, WhatsApps? So if you're happy to pop that into the chat, how long is your spring on average? So we have half an hour, again, another half an hour, 15 minutes, 5 minutes. Oh, it's nice to see there's quite a few half an hours. Okay, 1 minute. Of course, if you're waking up with our phones, it can be so tempting to immediately go into the messages, especially if they're not on flight mode or we're not using do not disturb features. Okay. So this is one of the things that revolutionized how I approach my sleep. When we wake up in the morning, two things happen. It's important to check in with ourselves, and it's a very magical time for the brain. So when you wake up, you're often still in what we call alpha brainwave activity. And alpha is where we are at our most creative. So it's when we potentially can problem solve and the brain is fully integrated. The nervous system is really relaxed. I'm sure you'll agree that out of the entire day, your nervous system is probably the most relaxed it's ever going to be as you wake up in the morning. And so the longer you can stay in that state, the more balance you have. And that's measured by HRV, heart rate variability, which is one of the strongest predictors of well-being for mental, emotional, and physical health. But many of us are not spending enough time in that harmonious state. And as we wake up, our brains are going straight into beta brainwave, which is about problem solving and being maybe in the fight or flight and making decisions. And that's okay. But the thing is that if it starts as you wake up and it continues right until you get to bed again, there's no time for your mind to relax and to be in that magical alpha creative state. Also, when you wake up in the morning, you might wake up feeling amazing, but you don't know if you haven't checked in with yourself first. And so often we pick up our devices and we were actually in a good mood, but then because we see something that's upsetting or irritating, immediately our mood can shift. And I know Brené Brown, who's quite an avid researcher, speaks about this as being emotional armoring, where, and as HR professionals, we're always there for everybody else, right? So often we need to, I'm sure you do, suppress your own emotions in order to be there for others. So in the morning, before you're about to open up and support everybody else, the most important person to support is you. So could you take an extra minute or two and check in with you? I literally try, and when I wake up in the morning, before I look at my phone or anything, is ask myself, how am I? How am I, and how would I like to be today? And the days I forget to do that, it's incredible how different I feel compared to the days when I do. Something else that I hope many of you are doing, and if you're not, is to think about this. Before you look at your devices, could you go and spend 10 to 15 minutes outside, even if it's cloudy? There's something very powerful about getting natural rays of light in through the eyes. So I started off with that exercise of covering your eyes. There's so much evidence and research coming out to support that if we spend 10 to 15 minutes within the first hour of being awake, exposing ourselves to natural light, it is incredibly important for wakefulness, and it balances the circadian rhythm, which then helps you to regulate your cortisol better. And when you go to sleep at night, you may find that you fall asleep and go into deeper sleep with more ease. So this is the one thing that really helped a lot with my insomnia. I try and do it most mornings. Of course, I don't get it right all the time, but when I do, I've noticed that that day, and especially that evening, my brain does tend to be more regulated and able to fall asleep. And if I'm not going to go into the benefits of gratitude, but in terms of mental and emotional well-being, if you can potentially incorporate a gratitude practice, because people often ask me, what am I supposed to do for 10 or 15 minutes? And unless you have a dog that you can walk, so you're already going outdoors. But maybe that could be a time where you could think about what you're grateful for. So you're not only getting the benefit of the photochemoreceptors having natural light and your brain getting regulated and your stress response being better prepared for the day, but you're also allowing oxytocin to be released, which allows you to have also benefits in terms of your physiology. So how could you potentially lengthen your spring, even if it goes from being 5 minutes to 10 minutes, or maybe from half an hour to 40 minutes? Because the more you demand from your system during the day, once you hit summer and you get really busy, the more important it becomes at the start of our day and the end of our day to give our nervous systems a little bit of a break. And talking about a break, sometimes when we are overwhelmed with work and we've got a lot to do and back-to-back meetings and there's so much going on, we can so easily be stressed and contracted and lift our shoulders and clench our jaws and take shallow breathing and get pulled down the fight or flight response, which is very straining on the body. And that's why we can get to the end of the day, feel tired, but be so wired that we can't rest well. And learning how to stop, even if it is for 1 minute during your day, can be a really valuable way to practice rest. So at night, when you're in bed, your body and your brain are like, oh, I know what this is. I've been here before. So what I'd like to do is have a second opportunity for rest. I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute. 1 minute. And what I invite you to do is count how many breath cycles you are currently taking. So I'll let you know when we start and when 1 minute is up. And what do I mean by a breath cycle? An inhale and an exhale is one breath cycle. So without changing your breath, I know now you probably will because I've made you aware of your breath, but let's be curious and see, how are you breathing at the moment? Because your breath is an indication potentially of how your nervous system is feeling. So starting in 3, 2, 1. Bring your awareness to your breath and count how many breath cycles you're taking over the next 60 seconds. And I'll let you know when a minute is up. And if your mind has wandered, that's all right. Without judgment or criticism, gently bring it back to your breath. And that's 1 minute. If you're happy to share in the chat, I'm curious, how many breath cycles are we taking at the moment? And the reason why I decided to do this exercise is your breath is a powerful indication of what's happening with your nervous system. It can also help your nervous system to get, it's like mini power naps throughout the day. So we've got quite a range, like from 20s down all the way down to 8 or 9. I'm so curious that those of you that checked in with single digits, whether you have some kind of breathing or meditation or mindfulness practice. Yeah, so why the range and what's the ideal? Well, the range is when we are quite stressed or tense, we tend to breathe faster and more shallow. That's part of the stress response. It's instinctive. That's why we need to learn how to relax. And what we know is if you want to be in brain and heart alignment, or sometimes that's referred to as heart coherence, we should be taking about 6 to 8 breath cycles per minute. I'm going to pop that into the chat. So if you were taking, say, 21 breaths or 19, as I saw, even 15, you can see that that's quite a range. So maybe it's not about changing your breath just yet, but it's about actually checking and connecting in with your breath by doing a mindful minute, because then you can be curious as to how is my breathing? Because when the breath is too fast and too erratic, the nervous system is fast and erratic, and it's like you're living on the accelerator all day long. Can you think about, before I move on, where could you implement a mindful minute in your working day? And if you're happy to share in the chat, it's lovely when we get ideas from others, but where do you think you could implement it? So I used to sometimes do it when I waited for the kettle to boil or when I made a cup of tea. I now do it in between meetings, especially when I need to shift gears, go from an intense conversation to maybe a presentation like this. Oh yeah, end of meetings. I love that. Because knowing where and when to do something can make it more likely that you'll actually potentially put it into practice, right? Because if all this stuff was easy, we wouldn't be talking about exhaustion or fatigue or burnout or lack of sleep. And I think what's really important is to acknowledge that there will always be work to do. Always. I don't think we'll ever get through everything. So we need to choose when we've done enough versus absolutely collapsing and getting to exhaustion. And it doesn't have to be big dramatic things. It can be a mindful minute at the end of the day before you shut down your computer and either go home or move into the next room, depending on where you're working. So reflecting on where and when you could potentially use just the mindful minute is wonderful. And if you want to build on that, is perhaps slowing down your breath to 6 breaths or 6 to 8 breath cycles per minute is a wonderful way to get into what we call heart coherence, which is a powerful way to not only help the nervous system, but also helps the brain and heart align, which means you think better, make better decisions, and you avoid what I call lizard hijack wizard moments. And as we find ourselves now in the season of autumn or the fall, I'm busy working with an American client, so I'm always quite conscious of the words now that work for them that are different to ours. We know that the seasons change and there's a wind down and a slow down. And remember when I showed that picture of the sunrise and the sunset, the sun doesn't just set beneath the horizon, but rather it's dialed down. And we need to dial down. The more stressful, the more output is expected of you in a day. And I recently had an experience of this because I had about 9 hours nonstop behind my computer. And although I did mini breaks, like the mindful minutes a few times, and I took a 15-minute lunch, I was so wired at the end of the day that I went for a walk in the dark just to kind of get a breather. And it certainly helped. I think if I'd got into bed like that, I would have started to toss and turn, and then that anxiety can build up, right? And then the anxiety just makes it so difficult to fall asleep. And ultimately, when we sleep, it's a bit like a hibernation. It's like I said, when the vines hibernate, they prepare, they get stronger. So many magical things happen in your body. Growth hormone is released. Your immune system is repaired. Your body goes into rest and digest. It's incredible. I sometimes wonder if that isn't the main reason why we're alive, is sleep, as opposed to when we're just awake, because it's the one thing that's never changed through the time. All of us need to sleep about a third of our time. So around 7 to 9 hours. However, many of us start our day looking at our phones or getting in this input within 5 minutes, maybe half an hour of being awake. And then right until we go to bed, we're still taking in information. So I'm going to now share with you the 5 senses and some ideas, some of the top things that have helped me and a lot of my clients. What I encourage you to do is think about not all of them, because that's overwhelming. I'd like, once I've gone through the 5, for you to think about which one of the senses do you feel actually, I think I could do more around that one. And then that's the one that you think about how you could tonight or tomorrow night bring in a new way of being. And I mean, it might help to keep some notes because I'm going to share quite a few tips around each, but of course you have access to this recording. But if you're like me, I have always the intention of watching recordings and I don't always get around to it. I've also summarized all of these tips and techniques into 2 handouts that I will make available to anybody who would like those. So let's start with the first one, which is around the sense of taste, you know, the things that we eat and drink or what we say and do with our mouth. And I think we all know, for many of us, especially if we're caffeine sensitive, too much coffee or caffeine too late in the day, alcohol, and also the way we regulate our blood glucose can impact our sleep. It's a good idea to have about a 2-hour break between eating a meal and then going to bed, which is not always easy if you eat really late or you have kids. And then there are supplements that you could take before going to sleep that are natural, that may help. So things like magnesium glycinate, maybe L-theanine, GABA, ashwagandha. But before you take any of those, I would speak to potentially a health practitioner, especially if you're taking other medications. Also, what helps is to have a routine. You know, those of us with kids, we understand the importance of bedtime routine. Same time, bath time, pajamas, bedtime story. And we need to treat ourselves in a bit of the same way. So could you get dressed into something that signals I'm going to sleep, or drink a cup of maybe chamomile tea out of the same mug every night, or listen to a piece of music. So when I talk about the sense of hearing, how could you bring in a routine that makes you feel like you've got your own bedtime routine and you do the same thing? There's also, I've been doing some sleep research around the voice and humming. So humming is very good for the vagal nerve or the vagus nerve, which you might know about. It stimulates that nerve, which causes us to go into rest and digest mode. Also singing potentially can help. So people that have started going to rock choir, for instance, I've got a friend who notices the nights that he does rock choir, he sleeps better. And that's because his vagus nerve has been stimulated by the singing and the lots of breathing and oxygen, and the body relaxes. Also, if you carry a lot of tension around your jaw like me, sometimes spending a few minutes just massaging my jaw and giving my muscles around my face permission to relax can also help. Moving on to our eyes. I've already spoken about how the eyes take in so much visual input, and light especially can keep us awake and can determine whether the brain releases enough melatonin or not. If you look at photos of planet Earth from outer space, the one thing that's really obvious over the last, say, 4 or 5 decades is the proliferation of light at night. So we often don't get a break from light. And sometimes in our own homes, this can be something we can easily change, is to be aware of an hour or two before going to bed. Of course, not just not having screens, a foot away from our eyes, but also softening the lights around us, using more light lamps rather. And when you go to the bathroom potentially and brush your teeth, is the light really bright? Because that can also cause you to feel more awake. And so think about what you're looking at. And also, giving our eyes a break by using potentially eye masks can help, or doing some soothing meditation where maybe you look at something that's more soothing. So if you are using your devices, I sometimes, depending on what I watch, because if you're in front of Netflix and watching a documentary that's going to stimulate your thought patterns, versus maybe the other day I discovered a fireplace burning. It was like, and I watched that for about 15 minutes. And although it was a screen, the intention and the permission was around using it for rest. So how can you soften the lights, especially an hour or two before going to bed? And then, are you using your ears and your sound and hearing effectively? What do I mean by that? Some people have said that these devices that you can purchase that release white noise or brown noise or some kind of background hum can help. I know that using certain earplugs, the silicone ones, the ones that don't go into the ear canal, are very helpful. Also, music can help to soothe the nervous system and activate the vagus nerve or the parasympathetic nervous system, especially music that is relaxing and calming, perhaps even nature sounds. So listening to sounds of rain and maybe waves, whatever works for you. And you don't know until you experiment, right? So if we tune into this orchestra that we have in nature, it can help us. And the relaxation that I'm going to do with you could be something you could experiment with, is using guided relaxation, especially something called NSDR, which stands for non-sleep deep rest. And if you've come across binaural beats is where you listen to music with headphones or sounds that give you 2 different frequencies through the ears. And that helps to override the busyness of the prefrontal cortex and potentially help your brain waves to slow down from beta, which is attention, alert, focused, awake, processing, jumping around, to more alpha and eventually down to theta. And that's when you can fall asleep with ease. We've got 2 more of the senses to get through. And this one maybe is obvious, but sometimes I speak to clients about this and they're like, that makes a difference. So being conscious of the temperature, what we know is that we sleep best at about 18 degrees Celsius. So, we all know what it's like. We didn't have much of a heat wave this summer, but when it's incredibly hot, how difficult it can be to rest. So be careful now as we head into winter. If we've got the heating on, our bedrooms are better off being slightly cooler or having a little bit of fresh air, and rather having heavy blankets on you. And then on the note of having blankets on you is thinking of the feel and texture of your linen. Like right now, when you think of your bed in your bedroom, how does it make you feel? Is there clutter? Are you happy with it? Would it make it feel like it was more of a sacred place to rest if you invested in some new linen? I don't know, maybe thought about painting or decorating it. I recently put a lavender infused candle on my bedside table. Never done that before. And I light it about 10 minutes before I want to go into the bedroom and go to bed. And the smell and the flickering light, I don't know, it's just really relaxing and soothing. And it's something I hadn't thought about doing. And then, of course, if you listen to the TED talk that I mentioned earlier by Matthew Walker, he'll speak about things like mattress and how important it is to change it and be comfortable. And if we're sleeping with somebody who requires maybe different things, is to think about how can you, of course, come to a compromise, but also, like I had many years experience of sleeping with somebody who snored. And if you find that you're snoring or somebody else is snoring, is to maybe look into using a tape to help with nasal breathing. So you put a little square of microscopic tape, so you don't tape up the whole mouth, and that can help to engage nasal breathing while we sleep, which helps a better sleep quality and better oxygenation, and improves, especially if you have sleep apnea, which can affect our energy levels and sleep enormously. But if you'd like to know more about that, I would recommend James Nestor, who's the author of the book Breathe. And he's also spoken about breathing and sleep and using that tape in many podcasts that he's done. And then the last one is around using our nose. So not just for smell, but also for breathing. So I'd like to bring your awareness back to your breath again. How is your breathing? And could you take one of the slowest, most deepest breaths that you've taken all day? So breathing in really deeply through your nose. And then as you're breathing out, to let your shoulders relax, let your jaw drop, your tongue drop to the bottom of your mouth, and allow yourself to still be alert and focused and doing the work that you're doing, listening to the session, but a little bit more relaxed. And if you're struggling with sleep, it's so important to practice relaxation breathing techniques in the day, so that at night, when you wake up and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, or when you can't get to sleep, you've actually got the muscle memory and the practice that you can default to, because you won't default to anything that you haven't practiced. And in the handouts that I'm going to share with you, there are some breathing techniques mentioned. Box breathing is a very powerful relaxation breath. There's 4-7-8 breathing. There's the body scan. And I'm going to take you through a well-established protocol for helping the body relax in a moment. But before we do that, I would like you to reflect on, and if you're happy to share in the chat, it's wonderful, and there's always a collective wisdom when we share. But if you think about the 5 senses, which one do you feel that you could be more curious about? And is there something that you could do to help you with that? So is it around what you eat and drink before you're going to bed? Is it around maybe using humming? Is it around your eyes? So managing the light that comes in through your eyes, maybe thinking about seeing natural things rather than intense Netflix things, or maybe reading a book. I forgot to mention that that's quite powerful. Maybe it's around experimenting with sounds. If you've never tried white noise, if you've never tried binaural beats, if you've never tried a guided meditation, why not try those? Maybe it's around managing the temperature and touch. So how you feel about what's happening in your bedroom. Or maybe it's about being more experimental around breathing techniques. Okay, so there's a range again from sight and eye. Yeah, the light levels are incredible. You know, when I spend time in the Netherlands with my Dutch friends, they use candles a lot. And I also noticed how my sleep can be better there, even though I'm sleeping in a new environment, which can often be quite difficult for me. So yeah, being conscious about the light that's coming through. And even if you start with 10, 15 minutes before you go to bed, being away from your phone, keeping the device out the bedroom, softening the lights around you, it's a huge step forward. And if you can start to increase that as your body starts to respond and you're like, this really works for me, amazing. Yeah, a lot of people tell me that their kids respond well to using different sounds. I've got a client recently who said that the kids sleep well when there's a fan in the room. So obviously that just helps a lot. So, what's good for kids is often good for us. We're just big kids. I think we take ourselves so seriously, we tend to forget that. Yeah. And how interesting. A ticking clock would keep me awake and stressed. But wonderful that that kind of pendulum sound is relaxing for you. We're so unique. That's why it's so important to think and try different things and not just take my word for it or anybody else's. Right, what I'd like to do now, because this has helped me enormously. So waking up in the morning, giving myself some spring, spending time outside for 10 or 15 minutes with my first cup of tea or coffee, not on my phone, looking up at the horizon, that and this, NSDR. So NSDR stands for non-sleep deep rest. It was coined by Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's a phenomenal researcher. And it's also called Yoga Nidra. So, but Yoga Nidra has the, I don't know, candles and sandals connotation, and people think it's yoga. It's not that. Nidra actually means sleep. But what it is a recipe, a process, a protocol that is quite well established and shown to help the nervous system and the brain relax. So what I'd like to do is I would like us to journey together doing an NSDR. It's going to be, I'm just checking the time, between maybe 5 and 6 minutes or so. And then afterwards, I will share with you how you can get a copy of the recording and those other resources that I mentioned and answer any questions. And so I don't know what environment you're in. And even if you can't do this, setting the intention to give yourself the chance to rest for the next 5 or 6 minutes is probably one of the best gifts you can give yourself today. Because remember, rest is the bridge to better sleep. The more we practice resting, even though it can be uncomfortable and all kinds of things can come up and we get edgy because we're not used to it, the more we do it, the easier it gets. And it can remind your body and your brain that you are able and capable and worthy of rest when you need to, especially at night, fall asleep. So what I invite you to do is, how can you get a little bit more comfortable? Maybe put both feet on the floor if you're sitting. If you can, put aside your phone or close down other windows if they are open. Soften your gaze, so let your eyes rest for the duration of this. And if you're comfortable to do so, you can close your eyes. And bring your awareness to your breathing. So bring your awareness to your sternum, the center of your chest. And notice your inhale and exhale. Notice how your chest lifts when you breathe in, how it drops when you breathe out. And what would it be like if on your next inhale, you breathed in through your nose and took in a little bit more air? So breathed in a little bit longer, taking in more air into your lungs, perhaps allowing your lungs to open up down towards your belly. And letting your exhale breathe out through your mouth. And again, breathing in through your nose, taking in a little bit more air than usual. And as you exhale, allowing your shoulders to drop towards the ground. Let your jaw relax, your face, your forehead. Let the chair that's supporting you hold you as you let your body sink a little bit more towards the ground, knowing that the chair, the ground beneath your feet, is there holding you. And what I'm going to do now is take you on a journey around your body. There's no right or wrong. I invite you to follow my voice, and if you lose track of my voice, that's okay. The intention is to give yourself permission to rest in this moment. So I invite you to bring your awareness to your right hand, the palm of your right hand, the back of your right hand, the fingers of your hand, your wrist, your forearm, your right elbow, your right upper arm, your shoulder, your right armpit. And now hold your whole right arm in your awareness. And bring your awareness to your left hand, the palm of your left hand, the back of your hand, the fingers of your left hand, your wrist, your forearm, your left elbow, your upper arm, your shoulder, your armpit. And now hold your whole left arm in your awareness. And bring your awareness to the top of your head, the top of your scalp. Scan down your forehead, your eyebrows, the space between your eyebrows, your eyeballs and your eyelids, your cheekbones, your nose, your top lip and bottom lip, your jaw, your teeth, your tongue, down to the front of your neck. And bring your awareness to the back of your head, right down to the back of your neck. And hold your whole head in your awareness. Now scan down your shoulders, right and left, down your chest, your rib cage, your right waist and left waist, down to your belly. And bring your awareness to your spine, starting at the back of your neck, down past your upper back, mid back, lower back. And hold your whole upper body, including your arms and your head, in your awareness. Now scan down to your hips, right and left, your buttocks, your whole pelvic girdle, down to your right leg, the top of your right leg, your right knee, front and back, your right shin and calf, the heel of your right foot, the top of your right foot, the sole of your foot, and your toes. And hold your whole right leg in your awareness. Bring your awareness to your left leg, the top of your left leg, the back, your hamstring of your left leg, your knee, front and back, your shin and calf, the left heel, the top of your left foot, the sole of your foot, and your toes. And now hold your whole left leg in your awareness. And bringing your awareness to your whole body. And from this place of deep relaxation, in your own time, take 3 nourishing, deep breaths, breathing in through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. And one last nourishing, deep breath in. And very slowly, before you think of opening your eyes, I invite you to bring some gentle movement to your hands, maybe moving your fingers and your wrists, maybe moving and wriggling your toes, perhaps rolling your shoulders forwards and back. And then when you're ready, open your eyes and slowly let the light back in. And before you look at the screen, engage with me again, is notice how this feels. That 5.5, 6 minute exercise of doing nothing but allowing your mind to focus on different body parts. Notice if it feels that you long for more of this. Maybe your nervous system is really craving that. Maybe you wish you could just fall asleep. maybe it was actually uncomfortable and you could sense anxiety come up. Sometimes that happens when we're not used to sitting still. It can be terrifying. Right, I don't want to leave you fast asleep unless you're able to. Amazing. So please, will you come back to the screen? And I recommend shaking your hands as if you have water on them and there's nothing to dry them off on. So just shake them a few times. Maybe stand up if you are at a seat. Move your body, perhaps stretch a bit. And give me a thumbs up or a yes or some kind of comment or an emoji or something in the chat. I'd love to see how you are after that relaxation. So that was an example of what non-sleep deep rest looks like. And when you can't get enough sleep, if you do an NSDR, the research is showing that it really helps the brain rest. It almost feels as if you've had some sleep or a power nap. And some of you might have actually drifted off. I find I've got 2 or 3 NSDRs that I follow, and every time I hear them, I often don't hear the end. I fall asleep. And days that I'm really wired, I use them to help my nervous system so that I don't end up making mistakes and feeling erratic and just not having a good day. Thank you for all the emoticons. So 3 things I'd like to gift you to share is, if you would like that recording that I just did, I've got not that exact one, of course, but I've got a 9-minute one that I will send to you along with 2 guides. So one of them is around sleep and the senses. And the other one I recently put together, I call it an emotional first aid kit. And it uses the senses as well, but it's more for what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're so stressed. And I don't know, a lot of the ideas have helped me, and I'd love if they can help you. And if you feel free to share it with anybody, I know that a lot of people count on you to help them with their emotions, their mental health. So feel free to do that. Thank you for the comment. My intention was for you to feel like you'd been somewhere else. And it was just 5 or 6 minutes. You know, you can do this every day if you give yourself the permission to. So feel free to sign up on that landing page so you can get those gifts. And, you know, if you enjoyed today, if you found it valuable, I know that Daniel and Jenny care a lot about the network. I care about you. We need more HR professionals that are healthy, well-rested. So if you'd like more of this, then let us know. And I'd be very happy to create and craft more content. Collectively, we need to help each other stay well and energized so we can keep a joie de vivre and joy of life. So thank you for making the time to be here. I celebrate you. I'm able to linger and stay on. I'm going to stop sharing. And Jenny, thank you for hosting us. I know that you're in the background. If anybody needs to go, you have 1 minute. You could perhaps do a mindful minute. If you'd like to stay and chat or ask any questions, feel free to do that. If you need to go and you have a question, you can also post the question within the Inner Circle community. And I know that Daniel or Jenny will make sure that I get that, and I'll be in touch with you. Or reply to my email and I'll be in touch with you that way. Yeah. Thank you so much. And remember, you don't need to take away everything. One thing is enough. You've got a lifelong journey to get this right. Thank you so much for the gratitude. Thank you. So if anybody wants to ask a question, you feel free. If you need to drop off, remember to keep breathing. Isn't it funny that we need to think about breathing, but we really do. It's very helpful to help the nervous system. Right, I think everyone's off. So thank you so much for being here. And I'd love to hear how you make progress around sleep, or if you have any challenges. Take care. Bonne nuit, as they say in French. Sleep well.